Thanks, Mr. Irvin. I'm Miss Ulrich, and I want to talk to you about transportation and communication advancements in the early 1800s. First, though, I want you to realize just how different life was, how much slower things moved before any of these advancements. So, for instance, if you were on land, you needed to make sure your animals were rested and fed, and then they could very slowly move a wagon for you. Keep in mind there weren't a lot of roads, which explains why when the National Road or Cumberland Road was constructed in 1833, this helped to dramatically reduce travel times and allow for more goods to be moving. But again, just from here to here. If you were on water before any of these big changes, you needed to rely on the wind. So keep in mind that that is very fickle, and you better hope that you're going in the same direction as the stream. That helps explain why when Robert Fulton, who's one of your Quizlet terms, invents the steamboat, this is going to be a major, major change to transportation. Now, if you look at the steamboat pictured here, you can see how much bigger it is, which means that it can carry way more cargo than that wind-powered boat from the previous slide. It can carry more people. And now, because of the steam engine, it can travel up or downstream. So this is going to completely revolutionize the country. This is going to help to put places like the Port of New Orleans really on the map, because that much more cargo is now going to be able to be traded. And again, with more cargo, more goods being traded or bought and sold, that means more money for people. So again, the steamboat allows for boats to now go up and down rivers. They didn't just have to go down the Mississippi like what had to happen before. Now they can go upstream as well. But as you look at this map, of course, there's only so many rivers, which means if we're going to utilize the steamboat, more man-made rivers are going to need to be built, which explains the construction of canals, which are essentially that, just man-made rivers. The most famous example is a Quizlet term, the Erie Canal, which is going to connect New York City. If you go up the Hudson River, take advantage of the Erie Canal, and now through Lake Erie, and eventually you can now ship things all the way to Chicago and help put Chicago more on the map. This was a huge feat, building the Erie Canal in particular. It took 8 years. Workers there, a lot of them Irish immigrants, by the way, had to build about 83 locks, which are like man-made kind of water elevators to help adjust for the different levels of the land. And this is going to dramatically improve trade, allowing goods to be transported at 1/10 the cost and in less than half the time as before. So again, canals, especially the Erie Canal and steamboats, dramatically allowing for more trade. There's even a canal closer to our home called the I&M Canal, which is going to connect Chicago to the Mississippi River all the way down here. And again, put Chicago even more so on the map. And so canals were a really big deal, and steamboats were very big in the early 1800s to allow for more goods and people, but especially goods to be traded. Another big transportation change was the railroad, which John Stevens gets credit for. And so this is going to become very popular because now they can ship a lot more things on land. It can carry a lot more cargo than a boat. And obviously, as long as you lay the track, which again, a lot of immigrants are going to do, then you're not confined to just waterways. And so the most famous example that we want you to know for this time in history is the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, one of your Quizlet terms. This is actually built to try to compete with the Erie Canal, and it is going to be the first commercial railroad that's connecting, again, Baltimore, the East Coast here, which was the second largest city at the time, to the Ohio River. If we fast forward to 1890, you can see just the network of railroads that much more magnified. So in the early 1800s, which is where we're at now, there were a lot of railroads. There's going to be even more in the late 1800s. And if we look here in the by 1840, you can see the yellow are the railroads, the blue are the canals, and you can see that a lot of this activity is especially up here in the north. It's already starting to kind of divide the country, and a lot of these transportations were being used to ship east to west, not as much north to south going on. But it's going to dramatically reduce the time that it takes to get places. So if you can see on this map, before all of these transportation changes, it took a day to get from New York City. You could only go to basically New Jersey. Now with these changes, look at the pink. We can go all these places from New York within one day. And the orange is it took over 6 weeks to go from New York City to these places before the transportation changes. And now this is what took over 6 weeks. So major, major changes in terms of bringing our country closer together. Now that there's more people, there's going to be a need for more communication. Now that there's more people spread out, there's a need to now communicate. Before any of these communication changes, if you wanted to deliver messages, you literally needed to deliver them by hand. So there's something called the Pony Express, in which they were hired riders that would deliver these messages along the routes that you see pictured. It was very expensive and time consuming. And so that helps explain why later you're going to read about this major change. The telegraph, the Quizlet term later is going to be Samuel Morse, but it's worth talking about now because this is when it comes about. Now that we have all this transportation changes, we want to connect people more, and the telegraph is going to use wires to now send messages far distances. So you don't have to physically deliver the messages anymore. So here's what a telegraph would look like. They would transmit the messages over the wires. Think of it as like a grandfather to the internet, and then it would be delivered. So it would be spit out into Morse code, and then it would be translated, and then ultimately you'd pick up your telegram or it'd be delivered to you. And so again, it was just one-way communication, but definitely a huge improvement from having to physically deliver messages. And so here you can see telegraph lines now being built, and this is actually in the 1900s, the White House Telegraph Office, which is kind of cool. So overall, if you see from this graph, you can see the speed of news dramatically staying very stagnant for a while. And then with the advent of the telegraph, it goes up big time. And then later with the telephone and radio, it's going to go up even bigger. And we'll get to that later. So some big changes in this early industrial era in terms of transportation and communication. Ms. Schacht is going to go into more detail about the specifics of the market revolution.